That all sounds amazing. How the hell did you lose? How can a rational person not vote for that? I mean, you're not saying anything that's restrictive. You're not saying anything that is in any way infringing on people's rights or liberties, or it just sounds like it's all just 100% positive for Canada.
That's what I think.
I think this was a masterclass in political communication.
We've said that if Pierre Poilievre wanted to go on the Joe Rogan Experience, this was his window to do it. Well, turns out he did go on the world's biggest podcast, and even liberals had to give credit where credit was due, calling it an absolute masterclass. Here's a selection of our favorite moments from the over 2.5-hour conversation, and why they mean so much for Poilievre's hunt to be Canada's next Prime Minister. Let's take a look.
So I got involved in politics, and I started reading about different things. I read a biography on Fidel Castro, and then I read
Justin's
some more.
dad.
No, not Justin's dad.
Right?
No. His dad was Pierre. His dad was Pierre. I had issues with Pierre Trudeau too. Because
it is a great conspiracy theory, though.
Well, it is a hell of a. I don't think it's a true one, though. His dad is Pierre.
Unfortunately.
His dad was very controversial while I grew up because he did a lot of damage to the oil sector, and we're from oil country. And so that was one of the things that I felt kind of resentful about the national government. And one of the reasons I got involved is because the West deserved a fairer deal. And but I read a lot of books like, Milton Friedman, Capitalism and Freedom, and I came to develop a philosophy based on just maximizing personal, financial, religious freedom. Let people make their own decisions. And that animated me to get involved in politics and fight for that. And I've been doing it ever since.
Okay, so this was a really early hand grenade that was thrown Pierre's way by Joe Rogan. This was at around the 8-minute mark. And this was, I think, one of the early tests in this conversation as to how Pierre was going to do. Because this is a theory that's been put out there. People have talked about the resemblance of Fidel Castro and Justin Trudeau, and you can look at the pictures. Like it's kind of creepy. But Pierre came out and put his stance on it, and this was something he had to do because he had to be very careful as to what was going to be said in 2.5 hours. They have to be careful with what they're said in 15 minutes. As we found out in our interview that was clipped by mainstream media, and they tried to paint Pierre as this, anti-justice, anti-RCMP guy that wants to jail his political opponents, which was obviously not the case. He just was calling accountability, and it was through a broader question, which had the context stripped from it. But in this case, it was calm. He just put it down. Even Joe Rogan was having some fun with this conspiracy theory. But it was great because Pierre didn't spend a lot of time on it. And then he pivoted right over to, his dad was Pierre, and I had a lot of problems with Pierre, and this is why. And then immediately pivoted over to, this is why I had problems with him. And it's actually affected my whole political mantra as I move forward in my political career. And it's shaped how I've approached my platform in my hunt to be Canada's next Prime Minister. So that was really, really well answered by Pierre. Big check mark there.
The unfortunate thing is that any organization that gets formed wants to grow. And you get financial incentives, and then you hire more people, and then it gets bigger, and then what do you have to do? Well, you have to keep doing what you're doing.
Exactly.
Well, what are you doing? You're killing people. So you're going to kill more people because you're actually financially incentivized to put more people through this program and end their lives. It's very sad.
I think we have to get to a point where people have the freedom to make their own decisions, but they also have hope that there is an option for them.
Yeah,
and
give
that's what
them
we're trying
a pathway. And like the exercise thing, it's not just give them, control of their life. It makes them happier. There's been studies that show it's much more effective than antidepressants.
Absolutely. Well, it's first of all, there's the physiological side, which affects the brain, but it's also the sensation of discomfort that you push through, knowing that you have to focus on the thing you have to do. And that, I think, it helps us in anything we're encountering, whether you're going through a divorce or a bankruptcy or an injury or an illness. If you know that pushing through to the other side because you've got a meaning there, that can give people hope for a better life. My favorite psychologist is Viktor Frankl, and he developed this Lagos treatment, which was basically giving people a sense of meaning. He survived the Holocaust in the concentration camp because he had a sense of meaning that he wanted to. His book was stolen from him in the concentration camp about this theory, and he wanted to live on so he could survive and write that book. And then he found in his teaching that it wasn't so much people's circumstances that determined their happiness, it was whether they had a meaning in life. And
so this is during the conversation about MAID, obviously. And this was one of our favorite moments just because Pierre turns this discussion, which is very dark and very depressing, into what he believes is physically and spiritually positive for people in their day-to-day lives, and doesn't just give people that are dependent on controlled substances, that are dependent on narcotics and malicious drugs. It's a lesson for everybody. And we live this out in our daily lives. Some people you see they're in their 80s, they look more useful than somebody that's in their 50s or 60s. And in a lot of reasons, or a lot of cases, that's because those 80-year-olds, they are still living a life that is full of meaning and full of purpose. Whereas some people, they lose that. If you lose your purpose, if you lose meaning, and if you don't believe you're useful anymore, your spirit starts to die inside. And when your spirit starts to die inside, that can affect your body physically. So this is a really powerful moment in this whole conversation, in my opinion. It's one of my favorites because this is the state of Canada right now. He says, it can, the endurance and the toughness that you need to push through discomfort in life, whether it be a bad day at work or a tragedy in life or a divorce or a bankruptcy or a period in your country's history where it feels like everything is against you. It's all the same. And this is what Canadians need across the country right now. And this is what we keep saying to people. And ironically, a lot of their conversation in the back half of this interview was on mixed martial arts and different disciplines, but there's so much symbolism that's behind it. In order to really succeed, you are best to focus on not just one discipline, but many aspects, so you can be prepared for anything that comes at you. And this will ground you and allow you to keep moving forward. And the mixed martial artist will tell you the fight is only over when I give up or when I'm knocked out. And if you can keep fighting, then you still have hope. And if there's hope, then there's always a chance that you can win. So this message right here is a really powerful one. And we wanted to highlight it because it's one of those ones that can easily get skipped over. But I want to really applaud Pierre on what he said in this segment.
There's a narrative in America. And the narrative is that you were about to win and your party was about to win. But then Trump came along and said that he was going to turn Canada into the 51st state, and everybody went crazy. Is that accurate?
I wouldn't say they went crazy. I mean, it was.
They got very upset.
They should be upset, though. I mean,
well, it's a crazy thing to say.
It is a crazy thing to say. Canada's not for sale. We're never going to be the 51st state. we love Americans as neighbors and friends, but we want to be uniquely and we want to be sovereign as Canadians. It's our country. It's where we grow up. You're a patriot as an American. I'm a patriot as a Canadian. It's where my grandfather arrived. It's where our collective ancestors put on military uniforms and sailed to fight wars. It's where our grandkids are going to live. We're very proudly Canadian. So we're never going to be the 51st state. And I just wish he'd knock that shit off so that we can get back to talking about the things that we can do as two separate but two separate countries that are actually friends.
Did that really have that much of an effect up there? Like, did people take him seriously?
I think at first everyone thought it was a joke. Because we've always had these jokes like, one day we're going to take over Vermont and Detroit should be part of Canada and all that stuff. But then he kept saying it, and it became a lot of people got upset about it, and I think understandably so.
Understandably, yeah. I mean, it's a crazy thing to say.
It is a crazy thing to say.
I talked to him on the phone about it. It was like so funny. He's like, at first I was joking, but then people were like, it's a good idea. Like, that's not a good idea.
What he's saying that, I can assure him of that.
So this is an interesting one, and this is one where I think he had to navigate very carefully because President of the United States watches this podcast. President of the United States likes Joe Rogan. And I think Pierre knew. I think he knew darn well that Donald Trump watches this podcast. And I think that this was very, very clever for him to go on this podcast at this particular time. Because Pierre probably knows that this gives him a unique opportunity to talk to Donald Trump without going to talk to Donald Trump, without suffering any of the political problems up in Canada, without talking to Donald Trump. Pierre actually goes on to say later on that he's not going to talk to Donald Trump in terms of any trade deals, any proposals or anything like that. And this goes to what we've been saying for a long time. He says, I believe there's one prime minister in Canada, and that is the respectful thing for him to do. It's what he should do politically. People can debate about that, but politically, strategically, that's what he has to do. So it was very clever for him to navigate this. He also knows that everyone in the mainstream media was going to be watching this as well, which they were. Everybody's talking about this right now, which is what Pierre wanted. And the way he did this is he defended Canada. He brought some levity to it, basically saying to Donald Trump, knock that crap off, please. Because when you're looking at this whole scenario, it's not helpful to the US or Canada to be talking about this. So it comes up from time to time. It's not really the dominant narrative anymore. It comes up from time to time. And even Joe Rogan is like, yeah, it's ridiculous. It's a crazy thing to say. He's like, I talked to the president. And he said, first it was a joke, and he said everything, and then people think it's a good idea. Well, there's not enough people that think it's a good idea in the United States or in Canada, let me tell you. So the way he stick-handled that, I think, was really, really smooth. And, he did so in a very lighthearted way. He didn't come down and talk down to the United States and Donald Trump, but he also puts this across as, we like our American neighbors because we do. There's a bunch of Americans that watch this podcast, and we love all of you. Why? Because, we're best friends. We've been best friends for hundreds of years. We're allies. We've fought together. We've bled together. We've died together. We've mourned together. We've been partners in national tragedies, 9/11, among many, many others. So the way he navigated this, I don't know if I could pinpoint any weakness in it. I thought it was phenomenal the way he was able to actually get through that, deliver a pro-Canadian message, not denigrating the United States, bring some levity to it, and try to get through to Donald Trump. Stop. So I think that was very, very effective.
So what would you be able to do to bypass all this bureaucracy? How could that be done legally?
Well, you slim it down to one project, one environmental review instead of 20 or 30. You have a fixed timeline that the bureaucrats have to give an answer of 6 months rather than just as long as they want to drag it on for. And the other thing I would do is study areas where they're perfectly situated to have a project like a pipeline or a mine or an LNG export terminal or a port expansion, and I would pre-permit it. I would say to our officials, go in, study, make sure that the environmental aspects are all in good order. I'll issue a pre-permit, and then anybody who comes along and wants to build it, as long as they follow the terms and act responsibly, has a guaranteed permit before they even apply for it. That I think we would have a roaring economy if we did that.
That sounds awesome, but the great fear is that if you do have an impact on the environment, that impact is often permanent, and that it's devastating. And I've seen some of the oil extraction that they've done up in Alberta, where you look at the area, it looks like scorched earth.
No. It's the most responsible oil extraction in the world.
But when you see these, what is that one area that often gets criticized?
Fort Mac.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, they're open pit mines. You open up a mine,
it.
you take out the bitumen, you separate the sand from the oil. You make it less viscous by putting diluent in it, and you ship it off. And then after the mining is done, they resurface it, and you wouldn't even know there was a mine there.
And there's no impact to groundwater, no impact to the environment.
I mean, there's an impact no matter what you do, but at the end of the day, the people who live there are very healthy and very happy, and they're the strongest supporters of the expansion of the oil sands. It's an incredible...
Because economically,
it's incredible. It's the best resource in the world. So it's like... there's no decline rate. You guys have shale here, but as the years go by, you get less and less out of a shale reservoir. We have very little decline. We can keep producing and producing. We have what's called in situ, where there's an entire oil sands operation under your feet. You could be out in a forest hunting, and you wouldn't even know that under your feet they're extracting it through a whole system of pipes where they inject just steam vapor that loosens up the oil. It sinks down, it goes into another pipe, comes up to the top, and you can have beautiful, pristine nature. The bears, the deer, the birds, they don't even know that there's extraction happening under their feet. So we have the best industry, the most responsible industry anywhere in the world. It's been a really disgusting PR campaign by extremist environmentalists and frankly some of our competitors to try and make our industry look bad, but it's the best industry in the world.
Yeah, they got me.
Yeah,
I saw some videos on it and I was like, oh my God, what are they doing to the ground? What are they doing to the earth? It looks horrible.
It's all bullshit.
You can tell when Pierre's getting comfortable. But I love this clip because if you've watched Joe Rogan, Joe doesn't suffer fools, right? And anyone making silly claims, he calls BS on it. So when Joe doesn't call BS on it is when the person actually seems to know what they're talking about. So the fact that Pierre was able to say, no, come on, that's garbage. And then literally starts explaining what the process is. And there's lots of pictures about people trying to denigrate the oil sands because you take one snapshot in time. Well, what happens after that's all done? Well, we're not going to show you that, are we? Right? And there has been some clips that have been, tried to be circulated about, places where, nature has completely retaken over and you'd never know anything happened there. So this was a really positive segment here, I think. You're still not going to convince the environmentalists, but he's down in the United States defending a top Canadian industry with some absolutely brilliant minds behind it, because at one point the thought process is, well, it could never be done. You could never separate the sand from the oil. And Canadians found a way to do it. And that's why this is such a massive industry in Alberta. And kudos to all of the folks that are out there making this happen and working in these companies out there and producing what the world actually needs to run. So I thought this was a really, really good segment from Pierre Poilievre, defending Canada, defending Canadian industry, and also educating people on how it actually works.
What are the other things that you would have to do to drop your debt and sort of balance your budget and begin to turn things around?
Well, in addition, so I like this idea that actually, believe it or not, that Bill Clinton and the Republicans did in the 90s in the U.S. It was called the pay-go law. It was a very simple principle. Every time the administration wanted to bring in a new dollar of spending, they had to match it with a dollar of savings. So there was no extra net spending for like 8 years. And that's when your government balanced its budget and paid off $400 billion of debt. That law lapsed in 2002. And immediately after that, America went back into deficits, and you haven't emerged. You've been in deficit now for 25 years. This is about internalizing the scarcity. Every creature in the universe, every bird in the trees, every fish in the seas has to live with scarcity, maximizing use of scarce resources. The only creature who doesn't do that is the politician, because he's always using someone else's money. Right? It's like, oh, well, I'll just print it or borrow it or tax it. It's not my money. And so they routinely show up to their cabinet meetings and say, well, I've got a new idea. It's $100 million. Where are you going to get it? I don't know. We'll print it. We'll borrow it. We'll tax it. Not my money. But if you had a law saying you can't actually bring a proposal to cabinet unless you have matching savings to pay for it, well, then you'd have these politicians walking up and down the hallways in their departments looking for waste and like rooting it out. So instead of making the single mom, the senior, or the small business owner live with scarcity, I want the politicians and bureaucrats to live with scarcity. And that's what I would impose by law on my government.
Well, it's just a rational way to deal with the problem. Like, don't spend money unless you could save money.
Exactly.
That's how you balance things out. I mean, Clinton did balance the budget.
He did.
During his time, and people forget that because we've always assumed that there's always been this extraordinary debt, but that's not the case. During the 1990s, I mean, he did a fantastic job at that.
Yeah, it was that Congress was very disciplined as well, and the American people just got fed up and said, we're not tolerating these deficits anymore. And they imposed scarcity from the center. And by the way, the economy boomed because the government was restrained and the free market economy could just roar. And that's another part of the equation, by the way, is unlock the power of free enterprise.
So this is an interesting section. And the reason why I wanted to highlight it is because Bill Clinton was a Democrat, right? He was on the left. But he's being complimented by both Pierre Poilievre and Joe Rogan for his policies. This is the difference, right? The issue is that all you hear from mainstream media in Canada that leans left, which is almost all of them, is almost anything that the Conservatives put forward, it's bad. And anything that Conservatives put forward, the Liberals vote against. Just because the Conservatives, will say that, well, that's a Conservative MAGA talking point. Never mind the fact that they took almost the entire Conservative campaign and ran on that in the election. So let's just, put that to one side. So this is interesting because you have two folks that are on the right. Joe is more in the center. But they're able to actually say, look past party politics and say, listen, this was a good policy. Let's use that. That's smart leadership. And this is where I think it's very interesting that they talk about this. They talk about how they can bring down the debt. They point to a specific example of where this policy and this approach was put in place, and it did have a material impact on the United States budget. Now, we're not going to be able to pay $400 billion down in our national debt because we're not as large as the United States and we don't have as much money in the economy. But the principle holds.
Like, this is the 250th anniversary, not just of the Declaration of Independence, but also of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, where he basically, for the first time in human history, described the free market system. And that was starting to flourish in the States and in parts of Europe. And that system basically started to come into place after, the late 1770s. The growth since the free market system has come into place in the world has been 200 times faster than it was before, because it is the most powerful system for generating material benefit for the people. And that's what we need to restore in Canada. I want to make it the freest economy in the world.
Well, that all sounds amazing. How the hell did you lose? How can a rational person not vote for that? I mean, you're not saying anything that's restrictive. You're not saying anything that is in any way infringing on people's rights or liberties, or it just sounds like it's all just 100% positive for Canada.
That's what I think. That's my mission, and I think it will be positive. And we'll get there. You know, Canadians do things through evolution, not revolution. So I'm just going to keep pushing my ideas, and I think overwhelmingly we'll win the next election.
So that clip is obvious why we included that, and honestly, the breadth of what Pierre brings to this job cannot be understated. And throughout history, almost all great leaders are students of history, because they study the greats and they see what's worked and they see what hasn't. And so they have context from all of these different teachers, from all of these different disciplines. And then they bring that to bear, and that forms a leader that's almost a mixed martial artist when it comes to political leadership. And that's the interesting undertone that is permeating throughout this 2.5-hour interview. A lot of this discussion has nothing to do with politics. And all of the mainstream media missed it. You completely missed all of it. But it all, if you unpack it, Pierre's a mixed martial artist of political leadership versus Joe being a mixed martial artist in physical combat. But the principles are the same. And this is where, as you listen to Pierre draw on all of these different sources that he's read, that he's studied, when you combine all of that, that's what forms a great leader. You cannot just be an expert in one thing. You have to have expertise in many different things. And you get that by reading, by studying, and by understanding. So this was fascinating to watch over this 2.5 hours. And the fact that he didn't dwell on the loss, didn't blame anybody, just said, well, I lost, so we move forward. That's exactly the way a MMA fighter works. They study the loss, they learn from it, and they move on, and they forget about it. So
one of the great interviews that I loved about you were eating an apple. And you were talking to this guy who was being completely ridiculous. You were asking him to define the issues that he had. And it was so funny. It was like, this is what happens when a rational person meets a person with empty narratives.
It was such a weird moment because
you just kept eating that apple.
It was such a good apple. It was so good. That's the thing. And the thing is, I didn't even realize I was being taped. I thought it was a print interview.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So that's why I think I was so relaxed. So I'm in the most beautiful place in the world. If you haven't been to the Okanagan, it's unbelievable. Like, it's lakes, it's mountains, it's nice dry weather, and there's orchards and vineyards there. Like, you'd love it. And so I'm in an apple orchard, and I'm walking around just talking with people, and my staff says, this reporter wants to do an interview, and I'm enjoying the apple. He comes up, starts asking questions. Nobody who was there thought this was a moment. Like, we'd thought nothing of it. We dumped the whole thing. My staff, unbeknownst to me, was recording my whole walk. We dumped this 15-minute video on the internet, and no one noticed it. And like 3 weeks later, my phone blows up, and people say, hey, how about that apple? I'm like, what are they talking about, this apple thing? And then, within 3 days, everybody's talking to me about this damn apple that I had almost forgotten about eating. So it was one of those weird things.
That conversation sort of, it embodied this issue. It really did, because you have rational thinking and empty narratives colliding.
Right.
While you're eating an apple. Like, you're so casual about it, you're actually eating an apple, which was so perfect. I mean, you couldn't, if you planned on, like, if you had a PR team, I think you should be eating an apple. They'd be like, ooh, I like it. So he's casual, he's eating fruit, it's healthy,
It was total
perfect.
Coincidence, like out of nowhere, not planned, and not even noticed. Like I said, no one there thought this was going to be a moment. We just, totally forgot about it.
I'm so thrilled that they actually talked about this. So I love that Joe brought it up. And it's perfect the way Joe talks about this, because he's right. This is what happens when you have ideology or narrative just colliding with common sense and rational thinking. Because rational thinking dispenses with BS, cuts through it all. And this is why process guys like me, we love process, because process doesn't care about your feelings. Process doesn't care about your narrative. Process cares about results, input, output, measurables. That's it. So you can have your opinion, but you can't argue with the actual data and rationality of it all. And that's what happened during that interview. This guy just kept trying to, experts say, and people are saying that you're using Donald Trump's playbook and all of this thing, and just couldn't get anywhere because there was no substance to it. And that's the issue. When you have nothing but a narrative, somebody who just approaches that from a rational perspective, you will get nowhere. We've seen it repeatedly. We saw it with Jordan Peterson on that one talk show with that unnamed journalist that went absolutely viral because he made her short circuit when just being rational, right? So this was I think an interesting point. And to Pierre's credit, you got to wonder, probably one of his most famous interviews. And I imagine this is the case with most folks. You never ever think that's going to be the one that you're known for. You just walk around holding his sunglasses, like chewing on an apple and just, answering questions. If he thought it was going to be a taped interview, he probably wouldn't have been eating that apple. So that's not usually something you do on a taped interview. You don't want to be seen like chewing on a fruit. But this was a phenomenal interview front to back. And we are, we're really lucky that Pierre is still around to be the leader of the Conservative Party at this point, because he's talking common sense, and the new campaign strategy that they've been employing over the last couple of weeks, I think, is spot on. Given my feedback to a couple people on that, I said you make no mistakes and keep doing this, and you will be fine. And as Pierre said, he's just going to keep pushing and keep putting his message out there. And I think eventually people are going to wake up. And the interesting thing is, mainstream media has been going nuts about this interview. And I think they've been trying to find things to get him on, and they can't. And even Christy Clark, who was going to run for the Liberal leadership of the federal party to try and be prime minister, this is what she had to say.
I mean, I think part of the problem that Poilievre has had is that he sounds like he's always attacking everybody, attacking the country, attacking what's happening, and so, which is natural. I mean, opposition leaders, that's their job, sadly. It's a terrible job. Worst job you can have in politics, actually. And so people don't get to see him being, positive. I think this was a masterclass in political communication on his part during this 2.5 hours. Are you kidding me? I would never have done an interview I never did for 2.5 hours. And there's some good reasons for that. I was shocked he didn't fall into any big sinkholes in the conversation that he had. He seemed like a person that I had never seen before. And when I was in politics, they always used to ask the question, me versus whoever I was running against, people, well, who do you want to have a beer with? Which is the one you'd want to sit down and drink a beer with? And he won on that question today.
So Christy Clark saying, this is the guy. Between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre, this is the guy I would want to sit down and have a beer with. When you have a liberal, hardcore, card-carrying liberal, looking at this interview and calling it a masterclass in political communication and saying between the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre, this is the guy that you would want to sit down and have a beer with. And in a way, she kind of told Canadians, maybe unintentionally, that if an election were right now, Pierre Poilievre is the one that she would vote for. That's what she kind of told Canadians, whether she intended it or not. I don't believe she would actually vote for Pierre, but the point is that's the impression she gave. So you want to know how well Pierre Poilievre did in this interview? Don't talk to me. Don't talk to any conservatives. Talk to Christy Clark.